Second, I want to encourage more movement.
Yes.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Brothers, if you could please move forward. There's plenty of space over here in the front. If you don't have to be in the back, I would really encourage you to come and sit over here if possible. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
ورحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المذلومين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا غريب يا مذلوم كربلاء. ما خاب من تمسك بكم والأمن من لجأ إليكم سادتي. يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم والقول كالحق والأصدق القائلين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
And one more salawat in honor of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran and the narrations of the Prophet and his family encourage on several different dimensions the importance of giving. We see amongst the furu'ud-din in the religion of Islam, we have the staples of zakat and the importance of giving khums. We see, for instance, narrations that encourage the importance of giving charity, caring for the orphans and for the widows, taking care of the community, and so on. In the religion of Islam, without a doubt, there is this extreme stress on the importance of giving, like we find in every religion and perhaps every culture. This concept of charity or this concept of giving is something that every human being, regardless of culture and regardless of region and regardless of language, know and understand, and it is a concept which is perhaps a concept that is fitri, meaning that the human being's innate nature inclines or understands or recognizes the importance of giving. I've recently overcome a study which stated, perhaps in one of the magazines in America, which state that actually when a psychologist comes to study an individual who gives or who is a recipient of a gift, obviously he becomes happy. If someone, for instance, today came and present toward you a gift of some chocolates, for instance, Every one of us would be happy by the fact that we've just received this particular gift. But this particular study states that actually the one who does the giving becomes more happy long-term in his life than the one who is constantly a recipient of gifts. Perhaps this is a reason why the human being often inclines toward giving and often inclines toward loving people who give. Those individuals who are generous in the community, those individuals who are known to be extremely charitable in history often are deemed as legends for centuries or decades. For instance, we see that the entire universe, if they were to learn about the story of Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus alayhi salam, everyone would love this particular individual. Because it was Isa alayhi salam who would go toward his disciples. According to narrations, and they state that he would go and he would begin to wash their feet. They would go to him and they would say, "Oh, our master Isa, that you should not be washing our feet, we should be washing yours, you're our master." He says, in this way of me giving you this, in the way of me performing this particular action, I am humbling myself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm also humbling you by means of this. If someone reflects upon this particular aspect, this particular notion of generosity of Isa alayhi salam, we see that he is an individual who everyone would naturally incline to and derive or desire to take lessons from. Similarly, when we speak about the character of a man like Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, the human being naturally loves this man. Every man, every woman, every child, everyone who knows Abbas, they love Abbas. Why? Because he did one thing that was unique from all of the other creations. This one aspect or this one characteristic that he has that separates him from the rest of humanity is his desire to give. And the fact that he wasn't able to give what he desired to give, it broke his heart. And for that, all of humanity, all of the world, the 300 million followers of the Ahlul Bayt, and everyone who has been exposed to the story of Abul Fadl al-Abbas, they tend to love him. What did he want to give? He wanted to give water back to the children. And the fact that he was unable to bring that water from the Euphrates back to the camp of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, the fact that it hurt his heart, the fact that he was too ashamed to go back toward the children of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, make every one of our hearts weep for Abul Fadl al-Abbas. Because his desire to give, his desire to be charitable, his desire to be selfless, is that what separates Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam from all of the other companions of Imam al-Hussein, and perhaps separates him from all of the other companions of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt or the Prophet in history. Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam is a unique individual. And for today's discussion, very briefly before we get into the tragedy of our master al-Abbas alayhi salam, I thought that we should take a brief look into the life of this personality and see where we can derive certain lessons. Please recite one salawat. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam marries al-Baneen alayhi salatu wasalam several years after the passing of Sayyid al-Zahra. Many people, they believe that al-Baneen was the first wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen after the passing of Lady Fatima. But rather we find that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam had actually married others prior to marrying al-Baneen, amongst them, for instance, a lady by the name of Asma bint Umais. Anyhow, we come and we see that Imam Ali alayhi salam, he goes toward his brother Aqil, and he says, "Oh Aqil, I want you to find me a lady who comes from a courageous and who comes from a brave family so that I can propose to her for marriage." When the question came to Amir al-Mu'mineen from Aqil, he said, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, why is it that you want to marry a lady who comes from a brave and courageous family?" Naturally, when we desire to get married, this is not necessarily the very first attribute or the first characteristic that is going to come to our mind. We'll state we want to marry a woman who is attractive. We want to marry a woman who is funny. We want to marry a woman who is rich. I don't know, right? We come up with all of these other characteristics, and oftentimes it's not courage or bravery. In fact, if someone told you that this lady comes from a courageous and brave family, oftentimes you would, might be a little bit afraid and say, I don't know if I want to go ahead with this. But Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, he desired these particular characteristics. When Aqil asks him, he says, Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, and why do you desire a lady who comes from this type of family? He says, because I want to make an investment on a very, very difficult day. It is said that Aqil says, no problem. I will go and I will do research and I will get back to you. And just to open up a quick parenthesis over here. Many people, they come and they ask the question, Amir al-Mu'mineen is Amir al-Mu'mineen. Why does he need to ask Aqil for advice in terms of who he should marry? Can't Amir al-Mu'mineen choose whoever he wants? Doesn't he already know everyone? Doesn't he have this type of knowledge? Well, absolutely he does. But perhaps Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam is trying to demonstrate toward his followers that there's no harm in seeking advice from others. And the fact that Aqil was an individual who was knowledgeable in genealogy and families and so on and so forth, that he should go and ask him and seek from him in order that he's able to fulfill his task in the community. And sometimes when we desire to get married, be it a man, be it a woman, it's okay to also ask for advice. Don't think that you know it all. Sometimes you can go toward the expert, you can go toward the elders of the community, go toward your parents, go toward the ulama, so on and so forth, in order to make this determination. Anyhow, Aqil goes. After a couple of days, he comes back toward Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he says, Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, there is a lady who I have found who comes from a very courageous and who comes from a very brave family. Her name is Fatima bint Huzam. At this moment, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, after hearing about her attributes and after hearing about her characteristics, he tells his brother Aqil to go toward her house and make a proposal on behalf of him. It is said that on that night prior to the proposal, al-Baneen alayhi salatu wasalam, Fatima bint Huzam, she has a dream in which a very noble man comes toward her home and proposes for her in marriage. And in that dream, she sees the moon sitting in her lap. Of course, Al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam is Qamar bin Hashim. It is said that that next day, Aqil comes to the house of Fatima bint Huzam. He enters into the house after taking permission. And he says that I've come to you with a proposal from Ali ibn Abi Talib. Immediately, who would reject a proposal from Amir al-Mu'mineen? Fatima bint Huzam. Immediately, she accepts the proposal and she agrees to marry Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. It is said that when the marriage took place, the first day, the first night of marriage, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam, after Fatima bint Huzam enters into his house, he says, Oh my wife, Amir al-Mu'mineen poses a question to his wife. He says, Oh my wife, today is the first night of our marriage. If there's anything that you need from me, if there's anything that you can request from me, if there's any gift that you desire from me, ask me on this night, and it is my honor and my pleasure to present toward you that gift. It is said that at this moment, she looks toward Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, and there's no coincidence that Abul Fadl al-Abbas and his brothers, they come from a pure lady like her, because she looks toward Amir al-Mu'mineen and she says, Oh Ali, I don't need anything. I don't need anything from you on this night, but I do have one very small request. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, What is that? She says, Don't call me Fatima. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, What do you mean? What better name is the name of Fatima? What can I possibly replace your name Fatima with? At this moment, Fatima bint Huzam looks toward Amir al-Mu'mineen and says, Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, I'm worried when I'm living in your home and you call me Fatima, that your orphan children remember their mother, and I don't want them to have that pain every time you call me. Look at the ma'rafah of this lady. At this moment, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, So what should I do? She says, Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, give me a title that you can call me upon by. At this moment, Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he calls Fatima bint Huzam al-Baneen, the mother of the sons, perhaps foretelling that she is going to have several sons later in her life. It is said that when al-Baneen first met Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein after marrying Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, they came to the home and al-Baneen goes toward Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein and says, "Oh my master Hassan." She is their mother. "Oh my master Hassan, oh my master Hussein, know that I'm not here to replace your mother Fatima, but know that I am a servant in the house of your father." It is said that when al-Baneen was pregnant with Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, some of the Khutaba state that every time Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam would enter into the room, al-Baneen would stand up. It would happen for several months. One day Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam entered into the room in the latter months of the pregnancy of al-Baneen. And Imam al-Hussein realized that this is very difficult for al-Baneen. So he goes toward her and says, "Oh my mother, every time I enter into the room, you stand up for me. It's not necessary that you need to stand up. You're pregnant, you're tired, you shouldn't have to do this. Rather, I should stand up for you." al-Baneen looks toward Abu Abdullah and says, "Oh, Abu Abdullah, I wish I could do what you're telling me, but since this boy was in my stomach, every time you entered into the room, he began to kick and he would only stop after I stand up." It is said that on the 4th of Sha'ban, 26 years after Hijrah, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam is in the mosque of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam when after finishing the salat, Qambar comes toward him. Qambar, his servant, comes toward Amir al-Mu'mineen and he says, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, that I'm here to give you the good news and the glad tidings of the birth of your son." It is said that at this moment, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, he gets up, he goes back toward his home. He picks up the son, he picks up his beautiful son, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. It is said that at this moment, al-Baneen looks toward Amir al-Mu'mineen and says, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, what have you named our son?" At this moment, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, "According to the instruction that I have been given, we have named this son Al-Abbas. And we have given him the title Abu al-Fadl, and we have given him the characteristic or a name that we could also call him amongst his other titles, As-Saqi." It is said that at this moment, al-Baneen looks toward Amir al-Mu'mineen and says, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, as for the name of Abbas, I understand. As for the title Abu al-Fadl, I understand. But as for the name As-Saqi, what does it mean?" At this moment, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam looks toward al-Baneen and says, "Oh al-Baneen, your son is known as the one who will quench the thirst of those who are thirsty. He is the one who brings the water. But I ask you, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas was unable to bring the water." It is said that at this moment, Imam Ali alayhi salam picks up Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. In his right ear, he recites the adhan. In his left ear, he recites the iqama. Then he begins to take the hands of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He begins to take the palms. He begins to touch the fingers. He begins to kiss them. al-Baneen looks toward Amir al-Mu'mineen and says, "Sayyidi wa Mawlai, is everything okay with my son? Is he healthy?" At this moment, it is said that Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "Oh al-Baneen, yes, your son is healthy, but I'm just reflecting on that day when these palms will no longer be on the arms of my son, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas." al-Baneen says, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, what do you mean?" At this moment, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, "I am remembering the tragedy of Karbala." At that moment, it is said that Zainab, she lets out a scream, she lets out a cry. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, he then gives Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas toward Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. According to the narrations, as we know, that when Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam was born in the holy Kaaba, in the holy city of Mecca, he was inside the blessed house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hands of Fatima bint Asad. And according to the narrations which we have all heard, he never opened his eyes until he was removed from the Kaaba and in the hands of the Holy Prophet. And furthermore, he took absolutely nothing from the milk of his mother, Fatima bint Asad, but rather the first thing that he took was the saliva of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam places Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam in the hands of Aba Abdullah. And the narration states that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, a couple of hours old, and he never opened his eyes until he was in the hands of Imam al-Hussein. And he refused to take he refused to take the milk of his mother until it is said that he took the saliva of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas was born to be a servant of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. Which is why we see in this particular narration, we see that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, he states in the narration, Rahimallah ammun al-Abbas, kana wallahi nafidul basira, sulbul iman, qatala ma'a akhihi al-Husayn alayhi salam bil-taf, wa madha fi sabilillahi shahida. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam says, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon my uncle, Al-Abbas. And then he states that Al-Abbas has two qualities which make him unique. Thus, very briefly, let's go ahead and take a look at these two qualities. The first quality Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam states is that Al-Abbas has nafidul basira. He has deep understanding and insight. What does this particular term mean? We defined basira a couple of days ago, and we see that when Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam says that the primary quality of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is the fact that he has this deep understanding and this deep insight, is the fact that he sees the reality of things before they actually come into fruition. It is said that one of the companions, for instance, of Imam al-Sadiq, he says that whenever I would see my master Imam al-Sadiq in the state of dua, I would see him sitting on the ground, raising his hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if he was begging to someone who was sitting right in front of him. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, he sees Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everywhere that he walks and everywhere that he looks. Of course, the sight of the heart. And what can we expect from someone who is the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salatu wassalam? In order to understand this particular attribute of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, when Imam al-Sadiq states, Kana wallahi nafidul basira, he is an individual who has deep insight, we need to understand the insight of Amir al-Mu'mineen. For one moment. On that day of the Battle of Khandaq, it is said that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam, after finally receiving the permission from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to go out and fight Amr bin Abd Wud al-Amri, he goes out and he begins that battle. We all know the story. It is said that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam against Amr bin Abd Wud al-Amri, and Amir al-Mu'mineen states that no battle was as difficult as that battle. It is said that they began the war and they began that particular fight. It is said that the Holy Prophet ﷺ, the Muslims, they were watching from one side, and the enemies were watching from the other side, until they were unable to see anything, because Amir al-Mu'mineen and Amr bin Abd Wud al-Amri were in the middle of the desert, and the sand had overcome them. The only thing that they could see is the electricity, the shock striking from the two swords. It is said after Rasulullah, after the Muslims, after the followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they're looking and they're watching the battle take place. All of a sudden, after some time, they see that the dust has settled and Amir al-Mu'mineen is sitting on the chest of Amr bin Abd Wud al-Amri. It is said that at this moment, Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam has the Dhul Fiqar in his right hand. He's about to remove Amr bin Abd Wud al-Amri and send him toward the fires of hell. As he's about to bring that sword down, as he's about to strike him, as he's about to send this individual to exactly where he belongs, he is bringing the sword down. When Amir al-Mu'mineen drops the sword, he stands up, he steps around a couple of times, then he goes back and he kills him. Then he begins to walk back toward the tent of the Prophet. They begin and they come toward the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of the Muslims, and they say, "Oh Rasulullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam had Amr bin Abd Wad al-Amri on the ground. He could have killed him at that moment, but he stopped himself. God forbid he got up and then he killed Imam Ali. Why did Imam Ali make this mistake? Why did he give him another chance? Rasulullah says, go and ask Ali yourself. It is said that at this moment, when Amir al-Mu'mineen comes back toward the tent, they come toward him. They say, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, Amr bin Abd Wad al-Amri is the man who, according to the Arabic legend, has the strength of 1,000 men. He's an individual who, according to the stories or according to the metaphors, it's as if he would wrestle lions as his hobby. Why did you give him a chance? You could have struck him and sent him to where he belongs, but you stopped. Why? It is said that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam looks at them and he says, as I was about to come down and as I was about to bring down that sword on his neck, at that moment he spit in my face and my anger transformed into my anger and not the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And wallahi, Ali ibn Abi Talib only kills out of the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam has this type of insight. What separates Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam from everyone else is that it was that internal battle that he fought. The fact that every step and every breath and every movement that he made was solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Ashura. And the thing that drove him was his love of Abi Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salatu wassalam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Secondly, it is said in the narration, Rahimallah Ammun al-Abbas wallahi kana nafid al-basira wa sulbul iman. And the second quality that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wassalam has is the fact that he is an individual with firm faith. He is an individual with extremely strong faith, and the best means or the best opportunity to test an individual's faith is when they're going through trials and tribulations. The hadith, it says, for instance, Al-mu'min huznun fi qalbihi wa bishrun ala wajhih. That the believer is the one who, even though he might be going through intense difficulties, he only keeps that pain in his heart and he always has a smile on his face. Who went through difficulties like Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas? Yet we see not for one moment his faith, his iman, his loyalty, his dedication toward his master, Abi Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salatu wassalam, ever wavered for one moment. And this is why Imam al-Husayn alayhi salatu wassalam honors Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. You see on the day of Ashura, my brothers and sisters, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam has several different brothers from different mothers. And we come and we see that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas was not the eldest of those other brothers. Yet we find that he is the individual with the greatest status. He is the individual. There's no coincidence that when you go toward Karbala, there's a separate shrine for Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas and not for anyone else. It's not something strange. It's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala desired to honor Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. You see, for instance, when Imam al-Husayn alayhi salatu wasalam goes to bury Imam al-Mujtaba, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salatu wasalam, when he goes to perform the ghusl, when he goes to perform that particular funeral rituals, historians, they write that Imam al-Husayn alayhi salatu wasalam did not permit anyone to be in that room of performing those rituals except for Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam. That Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is this individual of very unique status. We go ahead and we take a look, for instance, at the first time that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas has military exposure, and this is in the Battle of Siffin. Please recite one salawat. In the Battle of Siffin, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. and one more in honor of al-Banin. In the Battle of Siffin, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is 14 years old. It was the first time he has military exposure at the age of 14. The narration states that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas was sitting in the tent, and Imam Ali alayhi salam, he goes toward Abu Abdullah. He says, "Oh Imam al-Hussein, go and take your contingency of the army and go and catch the river bank of the Euphrates from the army of Muawiyah." It is said that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam gets on top of his horse and he begins to make his way toward the Euphrates. It is said that as soon as he leaves the tent and as soon as he begins to make that journey from one side of the battlefield toward the other side, all of a sudden he hears a voice from behind him. Imam al-Hussein takes out his sword, he turns around the horse, he's ready to strike the enemy, and he sees a 14-year-old Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas running behind him. He says, "Oh Abbas, what are you doing?" He says, "My mother, al-Banin, has advised me that I should never let you go anywhere alone, and that it is my job to follow you and be at your service whenever you need it." It is said that they come back toward the tent after some time, and on that day of Siffin, we see that Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salatu wasalam, though he was probably in his 50s during that time, he still fights like he fought at Badr, and he still fights like he fought at Uhud, and at Khandaq, and in Khaybar, and in Hunayn. Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wasalam, pierced through the army of Muawiyah one by one. No one could dare touch Ali ibn Abi Talib, until it is said that at one moment he turned around, he went back toward the tent, and he called out to the army of Muawiyah, "Oh Muawiyah, you come out yourself and come and fight me." But of course we know that Muawiyah would never come out and fight. It is said that Amir al-Mu'mineen would go out again. He would begin to destroy the enemy ranks, until it is said that the army of Muawiyah on that particular day, they said, "Oh Amir, oh Ali, enough. Leave us alone for one day. Send someone else instead of you. Otherwise you will defeat all of us." Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam says, "Fine, today I will give you immunity." It is said that he goes back toward his tent. He removes the armor. Then he calls Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam. He brings him toward the middle of the tent. He takes off his armor and he puts it on Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He takes off his helmet and he puts it on the face of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He gives him his sword. He puts him on his horse, and it is said that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas goes and he begins to fight the army of Muawiyah. As he's going and as he's piercing through the army of Muawiyah, all of these individuals, they begin to state, this is Ali again, the same way that he fought at Badr, and the same way that he fought at Uhud, and the same way that he fought at Khandaq, and the same way that he fought at Khaybar, and the same way that he fought at Hunayn, and the same way that he's been destroying us the entire day. Ali ibn Abi Talib is a liar and he's a cheater. He promised he would no longer come and fight us anymore. It is said that at this moment, Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he comes out of the tent. They all see his face because he's not wearing any helmet. And then they begin to wonder, what just happened? Is there two Ali in the army of Ali? Doesn't make any sense. It is said that he waves his hand back toward that boy on the horse. He comes back. He alights Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas from the horse. He removes his helmet, and they wonder, who is this boy with the beautiful face? And then Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, at that moment, he introduces to the world the boy with the beautiful face, saying that this boy is Qamar bani Hashim, my son Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. On that day, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam was the first time that he exposed himself toward Banu Umayyah. And they remember that day on the day of Ashura, when Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, when he comes out without a sword, and when he's moving toward the Euphrates, one of the historians, they write that 4,000 people from the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, they began to scatter right and left because they remembered what Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas did at the Battle of Siffin. Who is Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas? We have absolutely no idea. The human intellect cannot understand Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. The human heart cannot compose the love of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, this man, this individual. Salamullah alayk ya Sayyidi ya Mawlai. Please recite one salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This was Abbas at the battle of Siffin. Again, in order to understand the character of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, before we get toward our conclusion, we see that on the day of Ashura, Hazrat Abbas, he recited some lines of poetry that again demonstrate exactly his character, exactly his loyalty and his submission toward Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. It is said that at that moment, when Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, he reaches the river Euphrates, he picks up the water, he brings it closer toward his mouth, and then he throws it back onto the river, stating that there's no way he's going to drink this water. And many people, just to put the side note, that many people, they come and they state that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas actually desired to drink that water. I don't believe that. Because when you read the words of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, perhaps he was just in that moment where, as to demonstrate to the world that this water of mine, there's no way I'm going to drink it if Hussein and his children have not drunk. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, he begins to recite his lines of poetry. Ya nafsi min ba'd al-Husayn huni, wa ba'dahu la kunti an takuni, hadha al-Husaynun sharibul manuni, wa tashrabin al-barid al-ma'ini, wallahu hadha ma fa'alu dini. He begins to talk to himself. He says, "O self, who am I to drink this water when Hussein is there and he is thirsty?" As we mentioned, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is the man who has this quality of nafidul basira. He has this understanding, he has this insight, he has this aspect of loyalty, he has this aspect of submission toward his master, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, and he begins, and that which separates Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas on the battlefield is the fact that he has won this battle internally within his own heart. What does this mean? It is said that one day, for instance, one day when Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is the Khalifat al-Muslimin in Kufa, it is said that there's these two boys walking in the streets, and as they're walking, they pass by the house of Imam Ali alayhi salam, these two brothers. The elder brother looks toward the younger brother, or the elder friend looks toward his younger friend, and he says that this is the house of the leader of the world. This is the house of Ali alayhi salam. So the younger boy looks toward the elder one and he says, "This is the house of Ali, the one who was victorious in all of the battles, the one who is this great, courageous, loyal king." He says, "Yes, this is the house of Ali." As they're walking by, they see that Imam Ali alayhi salam is sitting in the courtyard of his home. He's sitting outside and he's having difficulty breaking a piece of bread. We know that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam would never eat soft bread. He would eat bread that was difficult to even break, to the extent that he would have to dip it in some liquid before he was able to chew it. It is said that Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam is breaking this piece of bread and with a demonstration of struggling a little bit. It is said that the younger boy, he looks toward the elder one and he says, "Are you sure that this is Ali, the one who ripped open the door of Khaybar? How could it be?" Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam overhears their conversation. He comes toward them and he says, "Oh my sons," he says, "when I broke open the door of Khaybar, just like he said at Khandaq, when I broke open the door of Khaybar, I did it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet at this moment I desire to break this piece of bread to fulfill my own stomach." Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam has won this internal battle within, where he makes every single movement in his life for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, which makes him this individual of great courage and of great valor and of great bravery. Which is why when he comes and he recites those lines of poetry, the first thing that he directs, or the first thing that he begins to converse with, is his own self, to win that battle of the soul, to win Jihad al-Nafs, when he states, "Ya nafsi min ba'd al-Husayn huni." Furthermore, we come and we see that when Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, and I ask you, O Mu'mineen, to please recognize this particular point that I'm going to make right now. It is said that when Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, imagine the moment, the day of Ashura, the family has passed away, Banu Hashim has passed away. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas has just had his right arm struck What are the lines of poetry he recites at this moment? Wallahi in qata'tum yamini inni uhami abadan an dini wa an imamin sahib al-yaqini najl al-nabiy al-tahir al-amini. He goes and he says, by God, if you've cut off my right hand, then surely I'm going to continue to defend my religion in the defense of this Imam, the Imam who is certain, the Imam who comes from this progeny, the pure progeny, and comes from the trustworthy Prophet, and so on and so forth. What is the unique nature about these lines of poetry? Someone might state there's not really much depth to it. So what exactly are you talking about? What I'm trying to state is that in this moment, in these last moments of the life of Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, after he's just had his right arm struck, after he is failing in bringing the water back toward the children, Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam composes lines of poetry to praise Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Yet we have individuals full of ignorance and full of a lack of knowledge who will come and state there's no need for us to recite the fada'il of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam. They come and they state, give us some intellectual discourse, come and recite something, that we can, so on and so forth, all this type of talk. Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, he wants perhaps his last words before he passes away to praise his master, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. This is something unique. This is something incredible. This is something that demonstrates the greatness of the position of Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, but at the same time the greatness of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, which is why in the ziyarah of Abul Fadl al-Abbas, for those of you who have been to Karbala, you know that when you go to visit Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, it has its own unique feeling. But when you go to visit Abul Fadl al-Abbas, it has its own unique feeling. In fact, we see that today, amongst the custom of many people, they state that we won't go and visit Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam first until we go and we visit Abul Fadl al-Abbas, because al-Abbas is the door toward Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I don't know if this is the right thing or the wrong thing. Whatever your heart takes you toward, that's acceptable and that's perfectly fine. But in the ziyarah of Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, when you stand in front of his blessed shrine, and those of you who have been there, take your hearts there at this moment, you look at the shrine of Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam. After you recite the permission to enter, you look at it and you state, Assalamu alayka ayyuhal abdu salih al-muti'u lillah wa lil-rasul wa li amir al-mu'mineen wa lil-Hasan wal-Hussein. These are the lines. You state, peace be upon you, O virtuous slave, O virtuous servant. Before anything, before Al-Abbas being the son of Ali, before Abbas being the brother of Hassan and Hussein, before Abbas being the son of al-Baneen, before Abbas being any of these, the first attribute that we attribute toward him is the fact that he was a virtuous slave. He knew his place as the slave of Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. And when you serve Hussein, see what happens to your legacy. You become a man like Al-Abbas alayhi salam. Assalamu alayka ayyuhal abdu salih al-muti'u lillah wa lil-rasul wa li amir al-mu'mineen wa lil-Hasani wal-Hussein. It is said that from that moment, when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam leaves Medina to go toward Mecca, every single step of the way, Hazrat Abbas was by his side. Abul Fadl Abbas was always there whenever he needed it. It is said, for instance, that whenever Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam would settle in a particular town or would settle in a particular city, he would invite the people of that city to come toward his way and go on this journey toward Karbala. It is said that on that day, when they reached Mecca and before they left, when they changed their niyyah to Umrah al-Mufrada and left Mecca to make the journey toward Karbala, it is said that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, he stands in the holy precinct of the holy Kaaba and he invites people to come with him. When he sees there's a reluctance of people who fail to come toward the path of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam because they felt that they didn't want to get involved in what they considered to be a political dispute, Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, he goes and he stands near the holy Kaaba and he recites a sermon. And he says, I begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of this house. O believers, come toward the path of Hussein. For you go and you try to perform the tawaf around the holy Kaaba when the Kaaba comes toward Hussein. You go to kiss and touch the Hajar al-Aswad when the Hajar al-Aswad comes to kiss Hussein. O people of Mecca, today you are here to perform the Kaaba, to perform the tawaf around the holy Kaaba and to perform the pilgrimage. Know that this house has no value if it were not for my father Ali alayhi salam. For do we not know that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam was the one who went to the Kaaba and removed it of its idols and so on and so forth, inviting them with these powerful words to come. And we find that Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam would continue this tradition until they reached Karbala. And even in Karbala, Abul Fadl al-Abbas would try his very best to bring people toward the path of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Please recite a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. On that day of Ashura, it is said that on the morning of Ashura, before the battle began, Shimr bin Dhul-Jawshan comes toward the middle of the battlefield. And he calls out, Aina banu ukhtina? Where are the sons of my sister? al-Banin and Shimr bin Dhul-Jawshan, they come from the same tribe. And anyone who would come from that same tribe, they would state that this is my brother or this is my sister. It is said that at this moment, Abul Fadl al-Abbas realized that this call was for him, and he refused to respond until he heard again, Aina banu ukhtina? At this moment, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, look at the akhlaq of Abu Abdullah. He goes toward Abul Fadl al-Abbas and he says, Oh Abbas, he says, go and respond toward him even if he's a fasiq. It is said that at this moment, Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, he gets out from the tent. He, along with his brothers, they go toward the middle of the battlefield. Abul Fadl al-Abbas says, what are you calling me for? He says, Shimr tells Abul Fadl al-Abbas, Oh Abul Fadl al-Abbas, for you and your brothers, I am giving you immunity on this day. On one condition, that you leave the camp of Hussein alayhi salam. At this moment, Imam al-Hussein, Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, he looks toward Shimr bin Dhul-Jawshan, and look at the words, the courage, the bravery that we love of Abul Fadl al-Abbas. He looks toward Shimr and he says, La'anaka Allah wa la'ana amanak. May God's curse be upon you and upon your immunity. You're trying to grant us immunity when you've left the son of the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala. Impossible. It is said that at this moment, because Abul Fadl al-Abbas recited these words in a very loud voice, he embarrassed Shimr and he turns around very angrily and he walks back toward his tent. And Abul Fadl al-Abbas, they come back toward the tent. On that day of Ashura, Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, he was along with his three brothers. According to the narrations, of course, Abul Fadl al-Abbas was the eldest. Approximately 35 years old or 34 years old, according to the historians. His youngest brother was a brother by the name of Ja'far, who was approximately 21 years old. His other brother was Abdullah and Uthman, according to historians, or Aun. It is said that on the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, after all of the companions had passed away, after Ali al-Akbar was no longer there, he went toward the camp of Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, and one by one those other three brothers, Abul Fadl al-Abbas told them to all go and defend Imam al-Hussein first, because he wanted to make sure, he wanted to watch over and see that they were all killed in the way of their master Abu Abdullah in fulfilling their covenant towards their father, Amir al-Mu'mineen. My brothers and sisters, this masa'ib is extremely difficult to recite, and today is a day of great tragedy. Before I get into the masa'ib, let me just recite toward you this one narration or one story. It is said that there was once this alim. In his dream, he sees Imam Sahib al-Zaman, Ajjarallahu ta'ala farajah. He sees Imam Sahib al-Zaman in his dream, and the Imam is sitting on the floor. And next to Imam Sahib al-Zaman, there are papers scattered all around. He's taking one paper, reading it, he's kissing it, placing it on his forehead and keeping it to his right. Then he takes the other letter and he keeps it to his left. Then he would take another letter and he kisses it and he places it on his forehead and keeps it to his right. The scholar asks him, he says, Sayyidi wa Mawla, Ya Aba Salih, I see you kissing some letters and keeping it to your right side, and I don't see you doing that with others. What are you doing? Imam al-Zaman responds toward him, that these letters that I am kissing and I'm putting them on my forehead and I'm keeping them toward my side, first of all of these letters are the letters of the hajat of my Shia. And those that were asked by the wasila of Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, I keep them in a special proximity next toward me, because Abul Fadl al-Abbas is Bab al-Hawa'ij. Why is Abul Fadl al-Abbas Bab al-Hawa'ij, someone might ask? Why is he the door to our desires? Some of the ulama, they state that perhaps all of those individuals who desired to do something and bring a desire back towards someone but were unable to do so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them this title of Bab al-Hawa'ij. Because Abul Fadl al-Abbas was unable to bring the water back for the children of Hussein, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says anyone who asks through Abul Fadl al-Abbas after that, their hajat are accepted. My brothers and sisters, tonight is a night of dua, tonight is a night of musibah, but tonight is also a night of dua. If you have a dua, if you have something that you need from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be it in this life, be it for the next life, anything that you need on this night, seek it while you're hearing the Masa'ib of Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam, because I swear to God, He is the way for you to have your prayers answered. Seek through Him. It is said that that poet, he comes and he recites, you've all heard the poem. He says that on the day of Ashura, everyone was calling Ya Hussein. And on the day of Ashura, Zainab called out Ya Hussein. The children of Zainab called out Ya Hussein. The companions of Hussein, they called out Ya Hussein. The skies and the heavens, they called out Ya Hussein. But Al-Hussein calls out on the day of Ashura, Ya Abbas. On that day of Ashura, Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salatu wassalam, he comes toward Imam al-Hussein. He comes toward him several times. Perhaps after coming toward him several times and being refused every single time, he comes one final time. And he says, Sayyidi wa Mawla, Halli min rukhsa, do you give me permission to go out and fight? At this moment, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he looks toward Abul Fadl al-Abbas. He says, Oh Abbas, you are the caretaker of Zainab. Oh Abbas, you are the hope of Sukaina. Oh Abbas, you are the one who everyone looks up to. Oh Abbas, you are the flag bearer today for my army. If you die, I don't have an army anymore. Do you know what Abul Fadl al-Abbas responds at this moment? He says, Oh Aba Abdullah, there is no more army. There is no more army. Everyone has died. Let me go out and fight. Let me go out and fight in your way, O Aba Abdullah. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he never wanted to let go. He never wanted to let Abul Fadl al-Abbas go out and fight. I'll tell you this, my brothers and sisters, that Abul Fadl al-Abbas, yes, he was that flag bearer. Yes, he was that individual who was courageous, but he would never desire to let down Imam al-Hussein. One narration, it states that when the flags and when all of the other properties of Imam al-Hussein and his family and his caravan were sent back toward Damascus, the alam, the flag was brought in front of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. As the flag was brought into Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he placed it in front of the family members, perhaps to mock them, perhaps to demonstrate some sort of arrogance. It is said that they began to inspect that flag that Abul Fadl al-Abbas used to hold. They said that the flag from the top, it is tattered, it is ripped. And on every single area of that pole, it has scratches, it has marks, except for one area. What area was that? It was the area where Abul Fadl al-Abbas was holding it firmly, because he would never let it go, because he was the hope of Sukaina as she was watching from that hill, and when she was standing next to Zainab watching what was going to happen. Thus it is said that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas says, "Oh Aba Abdullah, there is no army. Let me go and fight today." At this moment it is said that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he doesn't know what to answer. But then he says, "Oh Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, do you hear the children crying, Al-Atash, Al-Atash, that the thirst of the heat of Karbala is killing them? Why don't you go out and bring some water for them?" It is said that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, he goes into the tent, he brings the water skin, the vessel of water, he climbs on top of his horse, he takes the flag, he sends his salutations upon the children, he sends his salutations upon Zainab, telling them that this is the moment now where I come and bring you back some water. It is said that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, he goes with one spear on his right hand and the flag on his left hand, those hands which after a couple of moments he would no longer have. It is said that he begins riding toward the river Euphrates. It is said that when he comes out, everyone begins to scatter. They say that this is the son of Ali, this is the son of Haidar. If we let him come and fight us, we will all be destroyed. One of the historians write, and Umar ibn Sa'd says, "Move away, because Al-Abbas can move the right side of the army toward the left, and he will make the left side of the army and overturn it toward the right." It is said that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, he gets closer and closer until he reaches the river Euphrates. At this moment, he alights from his horse, he fills up the vessel of water, he picks up some water in his hands, then he looks toward that water calling out, "Ya nafsi min ba'd al-Husayn uni, wa ba'dahu la kunti an takuni, hadha al-Husayn sharib al-manuni, wa tashrabin al-barid al-ma'ini, wallahu hadha ma fa'alu dini." How can I drink this water when Hussein is about to drink death? It is said that he took the water and he threw it back on the Euphrates. He gets onto his horse. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas turns around. Sukaina is watching. Zainab is watching. They see the flag. It's coming closer toward the tent. All of a sudden, Sukaina, she sees the flag fall a little bit. What happened? Someone just struck the right arm of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He calls out, "Wallahi in qata'tum yamini, Wallahi inni uhami abadan an dini." Sukaina looks at Zainab and says, "Oh my Aunt Zainab, oh my Aunt Zainab, what happened to the flag?" All of a sudden at this moment, someone comes out from behind a tree. He strikes the left arm of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Sukaina sees the flag falls. All of a sudden someone comes. They take an arrow, they pierce it through the water. At this moment, O mu'mineen, Adam Allah ujurakum, Hadmana ibn Kahan, he takes the arrow, he pierces it into the right eye of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Someone comes, they take an iron rod, they strike the head of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. They take a rod, they strike the head of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Oh mu'mineen, when someone is about to fall, they have their hands to protect them. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas didn't have any hands. He falls flat on his face. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas doesn't have any hands. He falls flat on his face. He calls out for the first time, "Oh my brother, come and help your brother at this moment." Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he gets on top of his horse. He begins to ride toward Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. All of a sudden his horse stops because he sees the flag. He continues on his journey. He sees the right arm of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He continues toward Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, screaming out. He sees the left hand of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Barakallah fikum, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam,
he begins to come toward the army of Umar ibn Saad. It is said that at this moment everyone begins to scatter because they see the eyes of Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he alights from his horse. He walks toward Abil Fadl al-Abbas. Al-Abbas calls out, "Oh enemy, please don't kill me. Let me see my brother Hussein one last time." Imam al-Hussein says, "Oh Abbas, it is me." Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he goes and he sits next to Abil Fadl al-Abbas. He picks up the head of Abil Fadl al-Abbas. He places it on his lap. Abil Fadl al-Abbas removes it. He does it a second time. Abil Fadl al-Abbas removes it. He does it a third time. Abil Fadl al-Abbas removes it. He says, "Oh my brother, why do you remove your head from the one who is trying to care for you?" He says, "Oh Hussein, oh my brother Sayyidi wa Mawlai, who is going to keep your head on their lap after 1 hour?" Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he says, "Oh Abbas, let me take you back toward the tent. Let me drag you back toward the tent." It is said that at this moment, Abil Fadl al-Abbas, he says, "Oh Abu Abdullah, my last will is that you do not take me back toward the tent." It is said that he asks, "Oh Abbas, why?" He says, "Because I'm embarrassed from Sukaina. I'm embarrassed from Zainab. I promised them that I would bring them water, but I don't have it." Ya Abbas, Ya Hussein, Ya Abbas, Ya Hussein.
अब खत्म है लड़ाई अलमदार चल बसा अब खत्म है लड़ाई अलमदार बसा दूरे इमाम कहते हुए हाय क्या हुआ अब्बास कत्ल हो गए महशर हुआ बपा पहुँचे जो गिरते पड़ते तो देखा ये हाल ज़ार पहुँचे जो गिरते पड़ते तो देखा ये हाल ज़ार शान